Well, it's Saturday and I have received my new parts. Now, it's raining. If you look outside, you can see it is raining. So, what I'm going to do is just go over some of the components that I'm going to use. And as I mentioned before, for the air conditioning system, the hoses and tubes and all that were still in good condition. And I couldn't even replace a couple of them. And even if I could, I probably wouldn't spend the money. So I decided to just reuse them, clean them up, and so on. Now, for cleaning the parts, if you have access to it, you can purchase a special cleaner that they use for refrigeration and air conditioning equipment. However, I'm going to use this. Now, obviously, you don't want to mix lacquer thinner with the refrigerant in your system. So you can use that stuff in cleaning lines and components, but you never want to put that anywhere near any of the major components of your system, especially not the compressor, because if that stuff gets in your compressor and it mixes with the refrigerant oil and the refrigerant, it will destroy your system in a matter of maybe days. Usually it takes months, but it might be days. So anyway, let's look at some of the components. Now this right here is one of the original components that's going to go back in. This is the rear evaporator, and you can see that because it has this expansion valve. I've taken this apart. There's a little elbow that goes on it, and it plugs into the line. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to be replacing all of the O-rings in the system. Now, this expansion valve is actually what controls the flow of refrigerant for the whole system. Being the rear unit, that expansion valve is temperature controlled. It has this sensor, which is a copper tube that has something inside of it, and then it's basically connected to this. And this right here as a return line is going to get cold when it's in use, and when it's not in use, it's going to be whatever temperature the ambient air is. This temperature controls a diaphragm, which then opens or closes the valve, allowing more or less refrigerant. When the rear AC fan is not turned on, then that unit is basically going to not be active. So this will not allow refrigerant to go through, because if it did, it would get cold and freeze up. So once it gets cold enough, it'll just sort of shut off, and all the refrigerant will stay in the front of the system. This right here is the front evaporator. Now, as you can see, this is a brand new one. Although they managed to dent it up a little bit, so I had to straighten out some of the fins. That's why a lot of them don't look perfect. But it is now straight and ready to go. Brand new. It's even sealed up. I haven't even opened it yet. I'm going to go ahead and install that in its case before I even take those off of it. Now right here, this is the compressor. This is your typical FS12 style Ford compressor. These things are relatively cheap. Got this one for less than $100. Now, unlike the other one, when I rotate this one, it's nice and firm, and it has this plug that's covering it up, and because of that, you can turn it for a little bit and then it stops because it generates a vacuum. Now, I don't know if this thing was pre-oiled, but I'm going to go ahead and dump out the oil and see if it is. And if the oil seems to be the correct oil and the correct level, I'll put it back. Otherwise, I'm going to have to put new oil in the system and start over, which is no problem. But this, being the heart of the refrigeration system, it's very important that it's properly installed. Now over here, we have the new alternator. I was able to get the whole alternator for less than $90. And it's ready to go. I mean, it's a rebuild, not brand new. You can see it's been bead blasted. So, but it should solve that problem with the battery being drained. The old alternator still works. I wasn't able to get the right rectifier for it, but I'll keep it just in case I find one, which I usually will. And that's not a big issue. So anyway, that is pretty much the last remaining part is the receiver dryer, which I received a couple days ago. That's an important part of the system. Now over here, this is the rear evaporator assembly. I took this all apart, cleaned it out, put the fan, cleaned up everything, put it back together. The motor had a little bit of a squeak to it, so I disassembled it and I re-lubricated it. So that is now ready to go. And as you can see, it's not a very heavy unit. It's pretty lightweight and pick it up with a hand. It's all plastic. That goes in the back of the van. So, and here the boxes and stuff came in. I put my tools in there. And that's really about it. So this is going to be my project. Now again, I got to do all the line cleaning, and the problem is with the weather that we're having, it is just not, let's just say, not conducive for working, but the rain will stop and I'll be able to get back to what I need to do. So with that being said, and again, this is new. It doesn't seem to have too many, there's no dents in this one. They packed this very well. They put it in a large box so that nothing would be damaged. And by the way, this is an example of the parallel condenser I was talking about, where you have the lines coming in. They go to this main tube, and then it works its way up through this parallel connection. If this would be contaminated with metal particles and so on, you would never be able to clean it. The one that was in there was actually a serial style, but I figured for the cost of this one, which was less than $100, I would just go ahead and change it, because the old one did have a lot of, bumps and bruises and so on. I could fix it up. I'm going to keep it anyway. But starting off with a new one, that's kind of the best way to go. I figure the compressor, usually when you have a guarantee, you want to make sure that all of your components are new, although I am reusing this rear evaporator because of the long length between that and the front. If there was any contamination in there, it's very unlikely to make it back to the compressor. But I'm cleaning out the lines anyway. And again, this receiver dryer is brand new, and it's also sealed up. And when I do charge the system, I'll be using my handy dandy Robinair. So I will inject the correct amount of oil in the system, and I will be able to have the proper refrigerant. Now, of course, like everything else I own, that so-called label that's supposed to tell you how much refrigerant and oil to put in the system is long gone. So I'm going to have to do some research and try to figure out how much refrigerant and oil goes into a 1998 E350 Club Wagon. But anyway, yeah, it's Saturday, and weather permitting, I'm going to try to complete this job today. Now, worst case scenario, I may have to work on it some tomorrow, but I need my van for Monday. On Monday, I'm going to be basically working inside the house in the morning, and in the afternoon, I have an interview to do, and then probably after 4 or 5 o'clock, I have to go and pick up a load of material that needs to be moved from an office as soon as the workday is over. So hopefully by then I'll have my van, and if all goes well, it'll be air conditioned, which will be very nice. Because when I work at offices, I tend to like to dress somewhat professional. I don't want to look like some slob that is, wearing whatever he can find. But I do like to have a certain amount of appearance factor. So having air conditioning in the van really makes a big difference. And also, if it happens to be a rainy day, it's a safety issue, because instead of the window fogging up, and again, if you look at the window on my home, look at all that fog. And it's not even that cool in here. And that's just because the humidity is so high. Now, when you're inside of a vehicle, you're going to get that to a worse effect, because you're inside a limited space with a hot engine. Heat is coming up through the floor, and then you yourself are putting out heat, breathing out humidity, which is being concentrated. And as soon as you roll up the windows and it rains, that cool rain is going to cool the glass and fog up the interior. Then you have to spend all your time with a towel, which is what I have here, trying to wipe all the fog from your glass so you can see where you're going. So you don't end up driving off into a building, car, or into the canal. Anyway, that's my plan, and I'll talk to you later.